Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Is this thing on? Is that what I'm supposed to say? I am Elizabeth Dash-Buskirk. I am currently the curator of Be Civil, Be Heard, which is a nonprofit organization that tries to give space for groups to share ideas and get audiences together and the public together to encourage public discourse. Tonight's topic was brought to me by one of the debaters, actually, and a former student of mine, and I'm sure you'll hear more from him later. And so people bring topics to me all the time and say, hey, what's the right way for us to get together and discuss this? So I appreciate you coming in. Missouri State University does not sponsor this event, but the Missouri Debate Team and MSU Talks, I have to give a great thank you to Dr. Eric Morris, who has been so helpful in making these types of events happen and working with my nonprofit. I've been very, very happy about that. I do teach here at the university. I teach mainly in the socio-political communication area. So your public discourse is important to me in a number of ways. I'm just so excited to see so many of you here tonight. I'm basically here to talk about the civility paperwork that we forced you to sign when you came in. I thank you all for playing along with that. But it's not really so much a game as much as it is about we're going to be nice to each other tonight. All four of the debaters have signed on to these 10 tenets of civility. Those 10 tenets were developed by Be Civil, Be Heard in its original form, which was before I even moved to Springfield, Missouri, so I don't even know who all was involved in that. But I know that the Council of Churches was represented there. There was a sports organization that was represented, Parks and Recreation, and the Arts Council, I think. So there were a number of organizations that were very instrumental in making those 10 tenets come to life, and also the Pac-Man logo, which no one can forget. It might appear in your dreams tonight, I'm just saying. Yours and mine. Those 10 tenets are important to us so that everybody has an opportunity to speak. As you know, this will allow time for audience members to contribute to the debate, and that means that we need to allow that space for everyone in order to be heard. So we believe in progress through civility. We don't believe that civility ever stops conversation, but that it's a starting point, and that's what we'll be tonight. There's not really much of a punishment if you don't follow the rules, but we may ask you to stop speaking if you do sort of break those tenets and we become uncivil. I don't expect that to happen tonight. So thank you again. Thank you to Dr. Morris. Thank you to the debaters. I'm very excited to see you all here, and I hope that I'll see you at future events.
Well, as Liz mentioned, my name is Dr. Eric Morris, and I am in the communication department as well. My primary role is not teaching. My primary role is traveling with the debate team. I say primary based on the actual hours that I spend doing things. So we have a debate team that travels to tournaments most weekends of the year, but the debate team also has several levels of service commitment. One of those is we host high school and middle school tournaments, and we host an entire middle school debate league that has about 120 middle schoolers competing in after-school tournaments. And we have recently taken over an event or an organization called MSU Talks, which we've had for the last couple of years. MSU Talks sponsors public, audience-involved debates on the university's public affairs theme for the year. This year, our theme is Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness. And so all of the debates that MSU Talks has sponsored have fit into that theme in one way or another. This is the fourth of the 5 that we're hosting this year. And the 5th one, if you want to come and attend it, will be on the Affordable Care Act. And it'll be on March 30th in Cheek Hall 102 at 5:30 p.m. So if you're interested in that topic, you might find your way back to campus that particular evening. Now, I want to start off by introducing the debaters because this is the only session of MSU Talks this year where those debating are from the community as opposed to from the debate team. And I'm very excited about the chance to have that. So I'll start off with David Van Bebber. David Van Bebber, Jr. is a pastor at FBC Buffalo in Buffalo, Missouri. He is married to Valerie and they have 4 children, and it is by the grace of God that he is here tonight. Tristan Sean McCormack is next. Reverend McCormack serves as pastor of the Winchester Christian Church in Winchester, Kansas, and is the Sunday Protestant minister for Overland Park Place Residential Care Center. He holds a MDiv from Central Baptist Theological Seminary and a BS in History with Political Science minor from Southwest Baptist University. Sean was a highly decorated collegiate speaker and debater, earning national recognition in both high school and college. In his extensive speech and debate experience, in addition to his being led to attend a seminary with a more theologically liberal views than he personally holds, has equipped him to defend his faith against a plethora of different sources, both within and outside of Christianity. He is the co-founder of Shield of Faith Apologetics. Cora Hanf is a native of the Ozarks. Raised in the church, she obtained a degree from English from a well-known conservative Christian college, College of the Ozarks. By her senior year there, she had come to the realization she no longer believed in the Christian faith. After obtaining her degree, she went on a search for a community outside the church of like-minded people. She is a member of Springfield Freethinkers, the director of philanthropy for Springfield Skeptics, and sits on the board of Springfield Welcome Home, a local refugee assistance organization. And finally, J.T. Eberhard is a writer and public speaker about atheism, gay rights, and more. In addition to his popular blog, What Would J.T. Do?, he also contributes a regular column for American Atheist magazine. As a public speaker, J.T. addressed the National Convention on American Atheists, the National Convention for the American Humanist Association, and numerous other gatherings of atheists and free thinkers. J.T. is also the co-founder of the popular Skepticon conference, I like the name of that, which is held here in Springfield each year. In his personal life, J.T. is a trained opera singer who has worked under the directorship of two-time Grammy Award winner James Billings. He's also an avid gamer who can be found playing League of Legends. Recently, he joined forces with the hosts of Game Theory podcast to form the online hub Atheist Gamers as a place where atheists of all stripes, from board gamers to those who enjoy online games, can bask in each other's company. Now, our topic this evening is resolved that a faith commitment is required for the pursuit of happiness. On the affirmative side, we'll have David and Sean, and on the negative side, we'll have Cora and JT. I want to explain the format and your role in it. So we will begin with a constructive or opening speech for each side. David will provide that, and Cora will provide that. And then there'll be that's a 7-minute speech. Then there'll be a 5-minute rebuttal for each side, and Sean will provide that, and then JT and Cora will split the 5-minute rebuttal. After that, we will open it up to the audience for 25 minutes. And what you will do in the audience is, if you want to make arguments that lean towards the affirmative side of the topic in favor of a faith commitment as required for pursuit of happiness, you'll want to approach that microphone, line up by that microphone. If you want to make arguments that lean towards the negative side of the topic, you'll approach and line up near that microphone. During the audience argument session, I will alternate recognizing each of the microphones so we hear audience arguments on both sides of this topic with a 2-minute limit on each of those audience arguments. Then, after we've done that for 25 minutes, we will come back to the debaters who will consider their arguments and your arguments, and they will make closing statements. And the closing statements will be in the reverse order. The negative, which will be JT, will speak first, and then the affirmative will get the final word, and David and Sean will split that. Does anybody have any questions about the format? I'll help guide you through it as we go, but it's kind of interesting. So be thinking in your mind about arguments for or against this topic while you're listening to them make their arguments for and against the topic. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to David for his 7-minute opening constructive.
It'd be all right if I offer a thank you real quick before I begin my time. Outstanding. Just want to thank you all. As you can tell, there are people up here who like each other. We've had great communication and just been very fun. And so I do just think that it's great that Missouri State has allowed us to have this opportunity to get together and to discuss some things. So with that said, let me begin. And I'm starting my clock right now. So allow me to begin tonight by offering some definitions. So observation 1, definitions. Within the Christian framework, true happiness is found when one approximates to the objective purpose of life as elaborated upon within the teachings of the Bible. Because atheism is the positive non-belief in a divine entity, there is no objective purpose in life. But because God created humanity on purpose and for a purpose, true happiness is found in glorifying God and living in accordance with the divine purpose of life. Jesus implied purpose when he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. Now, this definitional framework challenges my atheist counterparts on 2 positions. Number 1, they must prove Christian theism false. Number 2, they must prove that they have absolutely no faith commitment. Observation 2, criterion. Now, in deciding whose arguments to prefer tonight, we offer the weighing mechanism or the criterion of consistency. Now, that means neither worldview borrows from the other worldview. If one worldview must use the principles of the other side, then they demonstrate an internal logical inconsistency and therefore must logically be rejected. Now, 4 arguments that my opponents must logically refute to demonstrate that a faith commitment is not required for the pursuit of happiness. Argument 1. The atheist worldview cannot justify the use of logic in tonight's debate. Matter in motion or space dust causally determined by physics and chemistry cannot account for universal truths such as the law of non-contradiction. Since naturalism provides no justification for the preconditions of intelligibility or the timeless universal truths, the atheist must borrow from the Christian worldview, which provides justification for such realities. Though affirming the immaterial does not exist, atheism in practice has to reject this position by using immaterial realities like the laws of logic, induction, and the unity of nature in order to make sense of the debate. Now, if atheists truly desire happiness, they must do 3 things. Number 1, they must truly reject all immaterial realities. Number 2, they must deny transcendent meaning. Number 3, they must justify the use of the laws of logic according to their very own worldview. So while the atheist will appeal to logic tonight, in the naturalistic worldview, logic, like happiness, is a subjective feeling caused by brain gas, which we have no choice over if naturalism is true. And if naturalism is true, logic and happiness have no transcendent meaning and no real value. Argument 2, atheism is a religion or atheism is a blind faith commitment. The Encyclopedia Americana states faith as a theological term, meaning a kind of knowledge that is different from empirical knowledge. Bovier's Law Dictionary defines religion as actions which cannot be regulated by human laws, duties imposed and calculated to promote happiness of society. Now, it is evident tonight that the atheists have made calculated and will make calculated decisions as a group to promote happiness. It is evident that atheists employ religious language to lend social legitimacy to their very organizations. Case in point, the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. I put that in there for you, JT. Faith is necessary for the cause as they both use faith language and religious structure. Now, one observes the absurdity of contending for a proposition if you don't have faith in it. Now, are the atheists tonight not affirming faith commitment by definition? Are they 100% certain that God does not exist? And if not, they are indeed exercising a degree of faith. To disprove a faith commitment, our opponents must conclusively prove all of their claims to be factual. Now, if my opponents contend religion requires a belief in God, which is a debatable principle itself, they are still demonstrating a faith commitment, and of course, that is the topic of our round. They have a faith commitment that atheism is true. They have the faith that the positions that they are defending are true. To say faith is not required for the pursuit of happiness is a self-refuting statement and a logical fallacy, and any argument based on a logical fallacy is to be rejected by any rational person. Argument 3. One cannot derive an ought from an is. Now, the Dictionary of Moral Theology states atheism is the denial of the existence of God, since God is the basis of metaphysical postulate of moral order. Atheism also implies a denial of morality. Without faith, the Chinese government achieves an acceptable level of happiness at Tiananmen Square by quashing the people's demonstration for basic human rights. Now, we're all familiar with that image of that lone protester standing up to a line of tanks. But in the atheist worldview, neither side was right or wrong. Both sides were happy with their actions. You see, it's only in the Christian moralistic framework that we can objectively know that that protester was right and doing right. You see, without an objective revelation and a consistent hermeneutic, there is no shoulds or should nots. In the naturalistic worldview, there is simply the case of what is. You see, the atheist cannot argue that anyone should not pursue happiness in the way they choose. After all, actions are just the result of chemicals and physical laws. Now, in the atheist worldview, you have no freedom to choose how to act or to choose what makes you happy. You don't even have the choice to determine what to pursue. You are reduced to mere dominoes determined by natural law. Argument 4. Scripture tells us that humanity has value because we are image bearers of the living God. True happiness is to repent from one's fallen state and to have peace with God. Peace with the triune God is to be consistent with one's thinking, acknowledging Christ as Creator, God, and Redeemer. To accept His Word as truth allows one to account for the laws of logic, to uphold human dignity, and to affirm an objective standard for happiness. In this debate, everything hinges on consistency. Is happiness a matter of opinion? Neural spike signals circulating in the frontal cortex of the brain in complex flows? Or does happiness result in transcendent beings acknowledging their Creator? I challenge you all to listen carefully tonight to the arguments. The atheist tonight cannot live consistently with their worldview. They cannot justify the use of logic or human dignity, and they cannot provide justification for the preconditions of intelligibility. They will live on borrowed capital of the Christian worldview. You see, the atheist is in suppression of the truth. The Christian theist, however, can live consistent with their worldview. They can justify the use of logic, human dignity, and provide justification for the preconditions of intelligibility. And happily, I might add.
I also have a brief introductory thank you statement, if I can request that out. That also doesn't come into my time. I would like to thank Reverend Sean McCormack and Pastor David Van Bebber for being willing to have a discussion on this topic. I also want to thank MSU for providing this great space, and Dr. Elizabeth Buskirk and Dr. Eric Morris for being willing to make this event a reality, along with the Be Civil, Be Heard organization. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into my opening statement. If the notion that a faith commitment is necessary for the pursuit of happiness, it would mean one of two things: that either every atheist alive is deeply unhappy, or that secretly we all have faith. And I know many atheists, myself included, who would consider themselves to be generally happy people, capable of pursuing happiness in absence of faith. Additionally to personal experience, we have international studies on this subject. The World Happiness Index correlates with the idea that religion is not necessary for the pursuit of happiness, as the countries that consistently score the highest in terms of happiness are some of the least religious. A Gallup poll rated Sweden and Denmark as the two least religious countries on the globe. Both of them are in the World Happiness Index's top 10, and Denmark was rated as number 1 in World Happiness Index in 2016. Conversely, among the least happy countries were Afghanistan, Togo, and Burundi, and all are overwhelmingly religious. The religions favored there vary widely. Afghanistan is predominantly Muslim, Togo is split between Christianity, Islam, and indigenous religions, and Burundi is overwhelmingly Christian. There's also the second option, that secretly we all have faith, or that we hold faith in science or some other abstract concept, or as Mr. Van Bebber mentioned, that we borrow from other religions. However, facts, I apologize, but trust in proven facts is far separated from religious faith. Facts derived from science seek to explain the natural world around us or explain events that have occurred. They don't tell us anything about how to live our lives or demand any actions. They have no agenda. Religious faith puts demands on the person who believes it, whereas atheism relieves those demands. Atheism isn't putting your faith into anything. It's simply a conclusion that the options for religious faith you're presented with are lacking and you don't believe them. Faith is the belief in something that essentially you have no proof of. It's a collection of speculations, superstitions, and traditions that have no scientific backing or proof. This is exactly why it is called faith and not facts. To try and call faith knowledge is also incorrect because knowledge gained without empirical evidence isn't truly knowledge, it's a belief. Beliefs can be wrong or incomplete, but knowledge is based in facts. For instance, your drunk uncle doesn't know that Canada is harboring aliens, he believes it. He has no factual empirical proof, so it's merely a belief he holds, not something he knows. Faith follows in the same vein. It is a collection of beliefs one has been taught, not knowledge gained from facts and research. Atheists can easily pursue happiness apart from faith, and it's not because we have some faith commitment that we are unaware of. We are simply unconvinced of the claims of religion. The wonderful thing about atheism is it demands so little of your time. It demands nothing from you, and it puts you in charge of your life and your own pursuit of happiness. For many, it was leaving religion and faith behind that opened the door to this freedom to pursue happiness. Dan Barker, a prominent atheist and former evangelical minister, explains it in a brief passage, in his book, Losing Faith in Faith. His father, who also left Christianity, explains it in a brief word, quote, "I am much happier now, to be free from superstition and fear and guilt and the sin complex, to be able to think freely and objectively is tremendous relief," end quote. Dan Barker also goes on to explain how his father was able to return to playing the big band music he loved prior to becoming a Christian and how much happiness that brought him. There are many who have similar experiences, particularly from groups that faith in its many incarnations is notoriously unkind to, these being LGBT persons, women, and racial minorities. Leaving behind their faith gave an opportunity to be at peace with themselves or even pursue their passions that whatever faith they were a believer in arbitrarily prohibited. Another thing to consider when examining if pursuing happiness requires faith is why is faith the key factor? Is it faith itself that helps the believer find happiness? Or is it the things surrounding the faith communities, the accoutrements that come with the long-held traditions and being a member of a group that has something in common that helps people pursue happiness? For instance, particularly in this country, most any town you move to, no matter how large or small, is almost certain to contain a Christian church of some kind. The notion that you could uproot and replant anywhere in the country and have an instant community is comforting. This also comes into play in times of struggle when you can turn to your fellow believers for aid in a crisis. This notion of support and community is one of the strongest aspects of religious life that I think fuels happiness far more than faith itself. And this is apparent when you speak to atheists. They often say, "I don't miss believing in God, but I do miss the community that the church provided." This is a key reason that some people who become atheists go on to create communities for atheists. If it was a lack of faith that was impeding their pursuit of happiness, they would simply reconvert or move on to another religion. But it's not the faith aspect they seek to recreate, it's the community. Skeptic and atheist groups are popping up all over the country with the idea that it is community, not faith, that is needed by humans. Finally, the resolution itself requires a rather large assumption on the person who would call it truth. It means you know what is required for another person's pursuit of happiness. Happiness is a complicated thing, not dependent upon any one variable. Studies on happiness always include multiple factors and are never based entirely on any single factor. Let's reframe the statement this way. Reading trashy romance novels is necessary for my pursuit of happiness. Now, while reading trashy romance novels does bring me happiness, and reading trashy romance novels may certainly bring other people happiness, it doesn't necessarily mean that in order for anyone to be happy, they have to read trashy romance novels. For some, they prefer a different kind of literature. Perhaps mystery novels, true crime, or science fiction are more their taste. For others, they don't enjoy reading at all. This doesn't mean that they can't pursue happiness, it just means that different things are necessary for their individual pursuit of happiness. To bring it back to the original resolution, it's entirely possible that your individual faith can bring you happiness, but it is hardly necessary for the pursuit of happiness for everyone.
Before I get started, can everyone hear me all right? As the members of my congregation will tell you, I have a strong aversion to microphones. It's nothing personal, but growing up in a military family, I have learned how to project. And so I'd rather not use the mic if I can get away with it. It's not that I intend to come across as shouting at everyone either, but I hate microphones. Anyway, a few brief thank yous, and then I'll jump right into the rebuttal speech here. Once again, I echo the sentiments of both JT and Cora and David in terms of thanking Missouri State University, their speech and debate team, Be Civil, Be Heard, and the other groups that have helped make this event possible this evening. I thank Dave, JT, and Cora as well for their willingness to be here this evening, as well as the audience. I think we can all see from simply turning on CNN and watching the results of both last night's speech by President Trump and everything else going on in our own government, that being able to have a civil discussion with people with whom you disagree is indeed a dying art. And without further ado, let us go ahead and jump right into things. I'm going to start with a simple definition of atheism. Atheism, according to the Pocket Dictionary of New Religious Movements, an organization and a source with no theological axe to grind, defines atheism, and I quote, as a system of belief that denies there is a God. The term originally was used in Greece of all those who, whether they believed in a God or not, disbelieved in the official gods of the state. Now let's discuss why that rejection is such an important thing. When we turn to the Dictionary of Moral Theology, page 104, we find that the necessary relation between God and morality is empirically a historical fact, because of the functions most universally ascribed to God, or the gods if you prefer, is that of watching over and sanctioning moral activity. Therefore, to deny God is to deny the first cause of the moral order and the obligation to conform to that moral order. Therefore, atheism is a denial of the existence of God, and since God is the basis of the metaphysical postulate of moral order within the framework of Western philosophical thought, atheism also implies an implicit denial of morality. I'll draw everyone's attention back very quickly here to the introductions that were given by the coach of the Missouri State Speech and Debate team. We noticed both in talking in introducing both JT and Cora that there were mentions of the civil causes that our opponents find to be so important. Why do they find these causes to be important? The answer is simple: because of morality, and because morality cannot exist outside of the framework of the belief in the divine. There can be no objective basis of what is right and what is wrong. So if you want to talk about an unobjective view of what happiness is, then I will happily draw your attention to the wonderful Democratic People's Republic of Korea. You may more popularly know them as North Korea. When Kim Il-sung assumed the leadership of North Korea, he kicked out not only the Christians, he banned all religions, replacing it with what is, in essence, following the glorious leader. Therefore, a rejection of the moral order is an embracing of fear. We see how the current North Korean dictator, and by saying these words, I of course ensure that I can never visit Pyongyang, but we see how the current North Korean leader, through his actions in assassinating his own family members, most recently, potentially his own brother Kim Jong-nam, through the use of a VX nerve agent in Southeast Asia, he's not happy. He runs an entire sovereign nation. He is a nuclear state in and of himself. No one can deny that he has power, but that does not make him happy. Cora talks in her opening statements about being generally happy as well. But being generally happy is not the same as pursuing happiness or being happy in the truest sense of those words. Cora's own social activism points to the fact that she agrees with us on either a conscious or a subconscious level that there are things in this world that generate unhappiness. And I will be the first one to agree with her on that point. Helping those who are in need of help brings, I think, almost anyone that would consider themselves a moral person happiness. But without, again, that framework of a belief in the divine, there can be no basis in morality. And when we draw ourselves back to the criterion of logical consistency, philosophically we see that atheism is therefore bankrupt, because their rejection of God is a rejection of the moralistic framework of Western philosophy. There can be no true pursuit of happiness apart from God. Instead, there are only lives that are left open and wondering, lives that deal with fear, lives that deal with problems that are too big for any one individual to solve on their own. And so therefore, you must agree that there must be faith.
Before I start rebuttal, mad kudos to David. I actually just did the math on this. You made 20 arguments that I wrote down, and I did the math. I have 300 seconds to rebut 20 arguments. That comes out to 15 seconds per rebuttal.
Is this one on?
Well, just use him, borrow his voice.
I was not trying to spread you. I was not trying to spread you.
So if I go a hair long to get some substance into these rebuttals.
You got the, give us a hair longer on the close.
You can have a hair longer then. We're good to go.
I'll time you, and then I'll just make up the time in the rebut.
That works.
All right, give me 1 second.
I don't believe in miracles, but if I could get substance into 15-second rebuttals, then there would be a God, and I would be him.
All right. So you believe in God?
If. All right. Civil David.
I had to throw that one out.
All right. Okay. So in David's opening, and I'm going to try and keep these as concise as possible because, like I said, 300 seconds. He said there can be. He said for us to pursue happiness, we have to have some kind of objective purpose. But let me switch these around so I have my notes over here. There we go. He gave no evidence for this, and I want the audience to remember there's a huge difference between an assertion and an argument. Assertions are just something you claim, arguments have some evidence. So when he says, without faith there can be no objective purpose, I would ask him why he thinks that, and ask him to defend it. Now, we can have purposes without having some overarching objective purpose. We all do. I have a purpose in trying to hear other people's arguments and trying to change minds. That's why I'm here. No appeal to God is necessary for that. It's just what I want, and that gives me purpose in life. Next up, I must prove the Christian faith false. First, why? Christianity could be totally true, and it would say nothing about our ability to pursue happiness. God could be up there, Jesus could be up there, and I could still enjoy playing League of Legends. And also, why must we prove Christianity false? Isn't the burden on the people making the claim to prove it? What if I said Smurfs are all powerful, and they say we can achieve happiness without God? It's up to you to prove Smurfs don't exist. That makes no sense. Like, the absence of any evidence is the evidence that their claim is right. That's why, or that our claim is right. That's why the negative always goes second in the debate. Otherwise, we can stand up and say, I know no reason to believe that's true, and sit right back down. So until he gives some evidence that his religion is true, it's not up to me to try and disprove it. Okay, he says there's a bunch of arguments we must refute. We cannot justify the use of logic because brain chemistry and whatnot can't. Well, even if I were to concede his point somewhat and say we haven't figured out how brain chemistry can produce logic, it still wouldn't help his cause. My ignorance is not his knowledge. He needs to assert what he thinks produces logic and give some evidence to that account. But unthinking particles arranged in the right way can produce logical thought. Computers do this already. Take the parts apart, they can't make decisions or perform logic, but arrange them the right way, and sure enough they can, right? Now you might say, haha, that means we need a God, even though I'm not sure why I'm defending or refuting the existence of God, because it's totally irrelevant to this argument. Yeah, we'll get back to that. If he tries to come back with that's why God exists, I'll get back to that. All right, atheism is a religion. At the same time, so David said atheism is a religion. Sean, in his rebuttals, gave a definition for atheism, and his was no theological axe to grind, a system of belief that doesn't accept God's existence. It can't really be one or the other, or has to be one or the other. But atheism obviously is not a religion. Not playing football is not a sport. Bald is not a hair color. The lack of something is not that thing. Otherwise, every belief is a religion, and obviously every belief is not a religion. He says faith is knowledge different from empirical knowledge. Cora touched on this in her opening. Not every belief should be counted as knowledge. Otherwise, my drunk uncle's belief that Mexicans are trying to overthrow the United States government would count as knowledge. Obviously, it shouldn't. Knowledge is beliefs, or it's a belief that is supported by evidence, hard evidence. Let me check my notes here real quick because I had something written down. Oh, I changed the page to Cyrus Johnson. How am I doing on 15 seconds in argument, Dave?
You're 341.
God darn it.
Be civil.
Okay. There's a reason that there's no such thing as Muslim algebra and Hindu science, right? These positions are so confirmed by evidence that they transcend the vagaries of our different cultures, right? This is why science is not a matter of faith. Religion and Mexicans coming to overthrow the government are. When he talks about what he believes in terms of his religion, why does he justify calling it knowledge? He should give some evidence for us to believe it's true, and then we can go on that. And once more, it doesn't matter if his beliefs about God are completely true. It doesn't change the fact that atheists can pursue happiness. He said we borrow language from religion to lend legitimacy. He cited the Church of the FSM. If you think we call it the Church of the FSM to make it sound legitimate, something is wrong there. Are we 100% certain about our beliefs? No, but we don't have to be. That's not faith. Faith is not the same thing as uncertainty, right? I believe, for instance, that Neptune is the 8th planet away from the sun, right? I believe this fairly certainly. Might we one day discover a planet closer to the sun than Neptune? Yes, totally possible. When that happens, I'll change my mind. Anybody who's open-minded has some level of uncertainty in their beliefs that allow them to be changed later. This isn't faith the way religion is. It's simply uncertainty, and it's intellectual honesty. To counter this, I would say, take faith as a justification for belief. Can you think of any position that is so obviously untrue, so flagrantly at odds with reality, that faith can't be advanced in its defense? If so, what good is faith in terms of acquiring knowledge? We must show religion to be false. No, we don't. We have faith that our positions are true. Well, we believe our positions are true, but like I said, uncertainty and faith are not the same thing. In fact, how many of you, we're at a college campus, how many of you are trying to remove uncertainty from your beliefs as much as possible through the acquisition of more knowledge? Right? We want to be more certain, right? The more uncertainty we have in our lives, the less conclusions we can derive scientifically. And those scientific beliefs gives us things like plentiful food, clean water, cures for diseases, right? The less uncertainty in our lives, the better we are. So if you're equating faith to uncertainty, which is what he's doing when he says that, that means faith is a thing we're trying to get rid of. Okay, page 2. We cannot derive an ought from an is. Sure we can. It's based on what we want. If you own a car, ought you to change the oil in your engine? Well, yes. What if you're testing an engine that's supposed to run without oil? Well, then you ought not to change the oil in your car. We derive oughts from ises all the freaking time. Do I want to smell nice sitting next to Cora? Then I ought to take a shower. What if it's been acid rain lately? Well, then I ought not to take a shower because I want to keep my skin. We do it all the time. We even do it with regards to the Bible. Exodus 35:2. Kill anybody who works on a Saturday. Now, I know. Jesus came, and now we don't have to do that anymore. Let's imagine I was alive 3,000 years ago and read that passage. I ought not to do that regardless of what the Bible says, because I care about making a better world and not killing people for working on some arbitrary day, objectively and obviously makes for a better world. Atheism implies a denial of morality. Why? We were given no explanation for why that is. In the atheist view, neither side is right or wrong. Well, the atheist doesn't have a view on anything besides God doesn't exist. That's literally what the word means. You'll find atheists who vote Democrat, vote Republican, think green is their favorite color, think red's their favorite color, think Pluto's the ninth planet, wonder what Pluto is. Like, Neptune, not Pluto. I love Pluto. But it just has a position on that one issue. We can construct moral systems without any appeal to God being necessary, as long as we just place our own happiness as something important, which I'm pretty sure we all do. It's why we have jobs rather than being homeless, because we're happier that way. We make that conscious decision. And as long as we all want to be happy, our happiness is dependent on the happiness of the people around us, the societies in which we live. And there are certain things that are objectively better for that. Atheists cannot say how people ought to react. Well, if we're wanting to make a society where well-being is augmented and our own happiness is preserved, then yes, we should. We shouldn't have the purge. The purge is a bad idea. I cannot determine what makes me happy. Sure I can. League of Legends, being married, hugs, internet pornography, all of the above. I must have, I didn't. You were talking so fast, there was an argument there and I didn't get to write it all down. Is happiness brain activity? Yes. We can put people under an MRI, ask them to report their levels of happiness, and watch particular areas of the brain light up, indicating that the brain is responsible for that feeling. And what's more, let's imagine I had no idea if happiness was the result of brain activity. Doesn't mean that he does. Once again, my ignorance is not tantamount to his knowledge. If he thinks that happiness is something other than brain activity, he should be obliged to say what it is and to give evidence for what it is. That's it. I'm good. Slightly more than 15 seconds to argue, but I tried really hard.
We'll add, that was 8:55. So that would be 3 minutes and...
Jesus will forgive me.
We'll round it down to an extra 2 minutes, excuse me, an extra 3 minutes and 30 seconds on
Knock yourself out.
extra 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
Okay, we have reached, it's not raised in that military family. We have reached that time where you all get to participate in the discussion.
Doesn't Sean get a rebuttal here? I don't know.
No, he rebutted Cora.
Oh, yeah, there's closing statements. Never mind. Okay, so you all get to make arguments. You should approach this microphone if you want to make arguments that lean towards the affirmative side in favor of a faith commitment as part of the pursuit of happiness. And if you wish to make arguments that lean towards the negative side, you should approach that microphone. And I hope people will approach the microphones. Please. Okay, we'll start. You have 2 minutes or less.
All right. Is this on? Did everyone hear me?
Yeah, next up. Speak up, hear more.
All right. Hey, I'm an agnostic atheist.
Is it good?
Speaking on behalf of that, would both of you, the affirmative, would say that for the pursuit of happiness, religious beliefs are necessary, meaning that we know, like texts like the Hammurabi's Code and the Torah, for instance, were acts of social and political control, playing on humans' nature to trust something that would comfort them about the afterlife. Would this suggest that happiness and morality are intertwined? Without law in the book, would there be no such thing as happiness?
See, the examples that you cite, for example, Hammurabi's Code, Hammurabi, of course, is the Babylonian king, just so we're on the same page. Hammurabi still exists within a societal framework that acknowledges a polytheistic society. Marduk, Tiamat. I mean, I can sit here and name more Babylonian gods if you really want to press me for it. Because, as we argued within the framework here, because morality, which is an argument in favor of happiness, because morality is predicated on there being a greater watching over, a greater sanctioning activity, in this case God or the gods, in the case of Hammurabi, if Hammurabi exists outside of a polytheistic society in ancient Babylon, then there is no impetus at all for him to produce Hammurabi's Code, for there to be that legal code that establishes what is right and what is wrong within moral order. And so that would be my response. Even within that framework, there's still a moral authority in the form of the gods. It may not be the Christian moral authority, and indeed Hammurabi is certainly so old that it would not have been the Christian moral authority, and I certainly won't argue with you on that point because Hammurabi was well before the time of Christ. But there's still that greater belief in the divine within Hammurabi, within just about anyone that you want to cite for creating legal codes.
Okay, so we have 2 minutes for somebody who wants to argue in favor of the topic.
All right, so you said, or Cora, you said that different things make different people happy. So if one thing made one person happy and then a contradictory thing made another person happy, say you like reading novels, but another person likes killing people, makes them happy. Is there anything wrong with that?
Well, I mean, happiness isn't necessarily tied to morality. I mean, you can have a discussion about whether your happiness should supersede over another person's happiness, but that isn't the topic of the debate. The topic of the debate is whether, as an atheist, you can pursue happiness. And, and certainly for some people, murder, all sorts of other heinous crimes do bring them happiness. And I mean, there's a lot of psychological and sociological and a lot of other things that play there. But I mean, it basically comes down to they can pursue happiness. Now maybe their happiness isn't a reality we want to see realized, but they are capable of the pursuit.
Okay, so she makes a good point. Like the resolution is can atheists pursue happiness, and we're all over the place. Try to keep it somewhat focused. But in terms of pursuing happiness, we can argue about what is best for our own happiness, which is tied to societal happiness. In terms of should people be allowed to read romance novels, well, sure, there's only upside for that person, no downside for society. Or murder people, which objectively, like he cited North Korea, like objectively this leads to an unhappy society. So if happiness is the goal, that should be therefore permitted. Now, because different things make different people happy, we do have these competing drives to do these different things that make us happy. Now, for all of us who realize that mass murder is not good for society, we have all the impetus we need to lock the murder-happy people away from us, which is exactly what we do. The prescription for happiness that requires no appeal to God, that makes perfect sense, just on reason alone, is exactly what we do.
Might I jump in? I didn't know we could vote. Can I make a response? I don't want to supersede any rules. So first of all, the major premise that I've looked at tonight is this idea. If you look at the case as a whole, she's appealing to things like reason, like logic. And my first premise as a Christian theist is what is the basic rationalization for anyone to use things like the laws of logic, which are universal, timeless, and unchanging. The atheist worldview provides no basis from which to use those things because they reject all immaterial realities like the laws of logic. Their worldview cannot justify those types of realities and entities. And so before we even get going on what happiness is, we have to look at the idea that there are objective realities that are being used tonight that the atheist worldview cannot account for. And therefore, when you borrow from Christian capital to make your worldview work, then you are proving the Christian theism true. And likewise, you are showing that happiness, just like logic in your worldview, is merely matter in motion. And likewise, happiness does presuppose this idea that there's human value and dignity. Why in the world does an atheist choose that there's human value and dignity? Because in the atheist worldview, we are bags of protoplasm on bones. And what is one bag of protoplasm on bones more valuable than another? And why does it matter if they pursue happiness? Because it's a chemical reaction.
Okay, now we have a 2-minute response from somebody wanting to argue against the topic.
I'm a Christian, arguing for the negative.
I'm sorry? I couldn't hear you, sir.
I'm a Christian, arguing for the negative position. It seems to me that your whole case is just misses the question itself. You're arguing that a faith commitment is necessary in order to pursue happiness, But from a Christian perspective, classically Christian perspective, we theologians going back to the Bible through Thomas Aquinas have always argued that happiness is attainable through natural grace. Happiness is attainable through natural grace. God bestows natural grace on all, whether or not they believe in Him or not. Happiness is attained through virtue, through the pursuit of a good life, a moral life, and that God gives grace to all, whether they recognize it or acknowledge it or not. What you're arguing is that belief in this God is necessary in order to pursue that life, which classically Christianity has denied is the case. Moreover, we have a definitional problem here. You haven't been really clear on what is happiness. The closest you got to it was some sort of statement that happiness is pursuit of Jesus Christ or relationship with Him. The Bible mentions happiness in various contexts. In one location, it defines happiness as a woman giving her...
Dude, I appreciate what you're doing. Is there a question mark here?
Yeah, I'm not getting a question, but I will tell you this. According to the Rutgers Encyclopedia, Volume 3...
Are arguments allowed, or is this purely question?
I think this is primarily arguments, actually.
Oh, never mind. Go ahead. Sorry, I thought it was Q&A. My bad. You go.
Okay. Genesis 30, happiness is defined as Leah giving her slave over to her husband, for her husband to have sex with her and bear a child. When that child was born, Leah was happy, and all women would call her happy. So there's a definition of happiness from the Bible, where a woman gives her slave to her husband to impregnate her. Another definition of happiness from Psalm 137, when you take the infant children of your enemies and dash their heads against the rock, you are happy. So where are we getting the definition of happiness? Aristotelian Nicomachean ethics is going to define happiness as the virtue-based pursuit of a good life, as opposed to an emotion. So what are we arguing?
So I imagine that you are a philosophy student from Southwest Baptist University or something like that. There's my guess.
No.
No, okay, I thought so. I knew there was a few of them. Well, hey, I appreciate everything you said, but I will tell you you're dead wrong on Aquinas. According to the Rutledge Encyclopedia, Volume 3, page 538, Aquinas argued that faith was necessary for reason. I'm sorry, you misread Aquinas. Next, I would say, excuse me, sir. Next, I would also contend that, of course, we do meet all the definitional parameters in this debate. We're pretty thorough in the way that we recognize it. Of course, I am a Christian theist, and I am, of course, looking at the resolution as a Christian theist. My definitions were quite sound according to what Christ said, as I cite him in Matthew, when he talks about purpose. So purpose, and of course, I would likewise note that any moral types of objectives that one would make are ultimately so that one will have happiness. Likewise, when I quoted, of course, the American journal, when I quoted the Journal Americana, I likewise noted that the pursuit of happiness by atheists is, the pursuit of happiness according to that source likewise is this idea that there is going to be some ultimate bringer of that happiness. So you have also misconstrued our arguments because we're saying, basically, look, you cannot pursue happiness without faith. Show me faith without happiness. When you make the move, which is a logically refuted statement, this is going to make me happy, what did you just presuppose? Happiness.
Okay, we have a 2-minute argument in favor of the topic from this microphone.
I am a Christian. I was not born a Christian. And so I experienced both levels of happiness. And so I guess my challenge to anyone who is an atheist would possibly be, I personally don't question that you can feel that you're happy. But I challenge you to experience the other side and the level of happiness that is possible if you know these essential statements.
I was a Christian apologist for most of my youth. I've been a Christian for longer in my life than I've been an atheist. I'm happier now.
Same here. I was a Christian, actually attended one of the most conservative Christian colleges in the nation, and became an atheist there. And I'm definitely much happier now.
Definitely agree with you that COO is one of the most conservative Christian schools in the area.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that.
But there
That's not a winning proposition for me to argue that.
who are raised in church and do all of that, but they have never tasted that personal experience with Christ.
I was deeply, in a very deep personal relationship with Christ. I was a leader in a youth group. I did everything that anybody who would call themselves a Christian would do.
And if
So were you in a relationship with the real being?
Well, obviously not, because we don't believe he exists, but we believed it was true as much as any Christian believes it true. Are you suggesting we didn't?
Well, no, that was just my question.
Okay.
Because she made it sound like she really felt like she was in a relationship with a being.
Absolutely.
Would we have claimed it at the time? Sure. And
a lot of
believed it.
people do. Just because a mouse is in a cookie jar doesn't make it a cookie.
But that's essentially saying there is no true Scotsman.
And that sword cuts both ways. We can say the same thing as you're in the same position we are, and there really is no God there. You know, neither of us know what's in the other's head, but we really did believe it just as much as any Christian, and we can say without any doubt that we're both much happier now.
Okay, we have 2 minutes for an argument for the negative side of the topic.
Hi there. Sorry, I originally thought it was a Q&A.
You can ask a question during your 2 minutes if you want.
Okay, that's nice. So I am both an atheist and Jew. Rabbi knows, and it's pretty cool. And so I see a little bit on both sides of what's going on. But I believe, and I don't think it's too contentious, that the pursuit of happiness is part of what it means to be an American. Basically, kind of part of what it means to be a human. And the very resolution of this is a faith commitment required for the pursuit of happiness is logically equivalent to are atheists capable of pursuing happiness, which is a pretty basic human thing. And with I know there's some self-serving definitions going on, and like obviously happiness is by God, and that's the only happiness that matters. But with the resolution being, are atheists capable of pursuing happiness, and arguing against it in so public a way that atheists somehow lack this capability of basic humanity, how is that so?
Say that again. I apologize. I was not tuning you out by any means, but go ahead if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah.
David?
Yes, sir.
So?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I got a little nervous there.
I'm sorry. I was not trying to tune you out. I promise. I was trying to listen, but I looked at one thing and I ended it, and I apologize.
So, Proposition 1, it's a pretty basic tenet of humanity to pursue happiness. Certainly, within American culture, we have part of what being American is the pursuit of happiness. This faith, is a faith commitment required for the pursuit of happiness? Contrapositive of that, I was asking. That is, are atheists capable of the pursuit of happiness?
Go for it.
And to say that they are not capable of this basic human, basic American thing, and arguing that they're somehow deficient,
but
how is that?
That's not the argument that we're making here at all. One of the arguments that we're making is, and it should be addressed, and it hasn't. Atheism is a religion. It is a belief system that puts faith in the idea that there is no God. It takes faith to equate such a position. And so that is the position that we are contending. No matter what you do, there is some type of a faith commitment. That position has not been refuted up to this point. It's been kicked around a little bit. But yeah.
Raise your hand if you think I didn't refute that. If you think I did refute that. Okay, I thought I heard myself do that.
You went with the how is the ball the haircut? Yeah. His idea, definition of atheism.
Yeah, and of course I would turn around and say that many people have baldness as their driver's license haircut. So yes, that is. There are many people that have this hair color on their driver's license. Bald.
Post the video.
Okay, we're in order for a 2-minute argument for the affirmative position.
I'll help you in a second. I'll help you in a second.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, we can't hear very well. We really can't.
Sure. Swallow the mic. Get everybody to say.
I'm Christian. I'm going to finish this.
Perfect. So I think one thing, just to piggyback off of what he said, I think, so you're asking if the positive side said denying an atheist to pursue happiness. I don't think that's the argument. I think the argument is they can't consistently pursue happiness. That they are pursuing happiness, but it requires some kind of faith commitment. Not denying the atheist that capability at all.
Does that sound right to you guys? Let's clear this up.
Yeah, that's our argument.
Okay, so we can pursue happiness, we just can't consistently do it.
You cannot pursue happiness without a consistent standard for happiness. So you can pursue some type of happiness, but within your worldview, it's simply brain gas. It devalues to simply matter acting as physical laws would. So is that really happiness? Our worldview says, hey, there is a creator who has purpose for your life, and when you pursue happiness, when you live according to that purpose, that is what happiness is.
But is it alright if I jump in here? Okay. I mean, I would say that as an atheist, you are capable of finding a purpose in your life. Now, do we say that, we're going to live eternal and have a life after we die and everything else that comes with your faith commitment? No, but that doesn't mean that our lives are without purpose. Many of us find purpose in the work we do in the community, in raising our children, loving our families, making a positive impact on the world, being involved with environmental impacts. There's a plethora of ways in which atheists develop meaning and through that meaning pursue happiness.
Can I interrupt? I'm sorry. Forgive me if I'm getting this wrong. I think the question he's really asking, or trying to get you guys to answer, is how can it be considered civil to talk about individuals as not being able to find meaning if you believe that atheists, or to find happiness, if you believe that atheists are not able to find happiness? How is that civil? Is that close? Okay.
Within the atheistic framework and within the argumentation that they have made themselves in their opening statements, they argue that happiness is found in scientific fact. Is that an accurate statement?
No. I would say that we approach life by looking at it through the lens of scientific facts, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's how we pursue happiness, because my enjoyment of, romance novels has no tie to scientific facts. It's just something I enjoy. Now, if you put me under an MRI, you could see the areas of my brain light up that, and that would be a scientific view of it. But as far as, I don't read a trashy romance novel and say, well, I enjoy this because it is firing the neurons in my brain that create this experience. No, it's...
So the argument then would be that happiness is best pursued on an individual level?
Yes.
Okay, then within that...
Hold on. I don't accept that.
Well, let him get it out.
Individual level as far as...
It's hard to uncouple the individual level of happiness from the societal level. How many of you here want to grow your own crops and hunt your own game to eat at night? Yeah, nobody. How many of you like having Walmart there or some others, right? So, our happiness is dependent on other people. We can't all train to be dentists, so some people train to be dentists. Our individual happiness is tied to societal happiness, and a lot of that is tied to science. Who wants to live here versus 200 years ago? Everybody, right? We like the internet, we like cell phones, we like...
Sanitation.
So I guess the ultimate position that we're asking is where and when do atheists have the ability to choose what is and what is not happiness? There is no objective standard. So again, when that lone protester on Tiananmen Square stood in front of the tank and said, no, humans have dignity, and the Chinese government said, oh no, they don't, and they were perfectly happy with it. What is the objective standard to say, hey, this is what good happiness is, and this is what bad happiness is? There's so many presuppositions that are being dealt with or being taken for granted on this idea. Again, faith that something will make you happy, and then likewise, when and where do you get some objective standard for what can't be pursued as happiness?
Okay, so first, you talk about choosing what makes us happy. I don't choose what makes me happy. I didn't choose to like internet porn. I just do. I was born that way. Well, became that way in middle school. Anyway, As far as what makes people happy on a societal level, like, it's not going to be perfect. We keep changing our rules based on improved understanding about what makes for a happier society. And there are some things that do objectively make for a happier society. Locking away the murderers. So objectively makes for healthier societies. If you took reports of happiness in nations that had mass murder versus nations without mass murder, you're going to see more happiness. Now, are we perfect at it? No, we're getting better and better, but all knowledge is that way. Like the periodic chart, I mean, this is as basic chemistry as you get. It's 12 permutation. Our knowledge keeps getting better, and so changes our rules of morality, because we make them. We make the laws. You know, even the stuff in the Bible people wrote down, that's all us.
And the Christian, even the Christian framework for morality, I would argue, has changed. Because if you look at the Old Testament, it said if somebody works on a Sunday,
You can't be Christian.
kill them.
You can't be Christian before the New Testament.
Well,
There were no Christians before the New. In the
Hold
Old
on,
Testament.
we had a Jewish guy in the audience.
There were no Christians in the Old Testament. I promise
So
you.
biblical morality then, does evolve, and so this notion that if there is no objective truth, there can't be happiness.
So, like imagine we didn't have the Bible. Like the Bible was a book that never got written. Do you think we wouldn't have figured out that locking away mass murderers wasn't good for societal happiness?
Why did you presuppose that humans had value and dignity, which is space dust?
Because my happiness is important to me,
But
and
what if
my happiness is dependent upon living within a functional and stable society.
What if it makes me happy to just kerosene the whole anthill because there's a lot of human suffering and we can get, oh man, things will be a lot better.
Then the rest of us, who all acknowledge that arsonists are bad for the world, have all the impetus to create laws and lock you away from the rest of us to preserve our own happiness.
So
which
happiness
is what we do.
Happiness
We do that, right?
Predicated on the weight of numbers.
What?
Happiness, therefore, is predicated on the weight of numbers. Whatever the most people agree to as being the right thing should be what spawns happiness within that framework. We should be arguing, therefore, that the Taliban, because at the point where it was in charge of Afghanistan between, 1985 and 2005
That's
or
not
so,
at
because
all.
they had the greatest weight of numbers within the national framework of Afghanistan, clearly they must have been happy.
No, mass opinion does not determine morality, but we do have shared values. I mean, you asked why, as atheists, we signed on to these civil discourse rules, because we have a shared interest. We want to have a productive conversation, and we all agree that these are objective ways to get there, right?
Okay, I want to pull back to the audience.
Can I finish my question? They kind of took off. I'm happy.
I'm sorry, sir, all your time has been used. We need you to sit down.
Happy to give you more.
Squirrel.
More to make. And I'll be brief.
Also 10 points from Gryffindor.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I missed it, whatever that was. So, I feel like when I hear the term pursuit of happiness, I feel like that is like a deep, transcendent, like purpose-giving, meaning fulfillment in someone's life. And it seems to me, and I'll leave it after this, but it seems to me that the atheist side is conceding that happiness is just a feeling. It is just, I feel, I woke up feeling 1% more happy today than yesterday. So when you talk about societal happiness, that's, X amount of people are smiling this morning versus, in a different community, or people are frowning. And to me, I don't know that that's like a very profound thing to debate over whether people can feel good without faith. When I hear this question, I think of pursuit, of deep meaning, deep happiness, joy. So I guess.
I don't think we're conceding that happiness is just a feeling. We're asserting that it is a feeling. You guys have all felt happiness at one point or another, right? You like it? I mean, think about it. Pretty much every choice you ever make is about what's going to make you feel happy. My wedding day made me feel happy. Being here doing this event made me feel happy. The first time I ever got to sing opera with an orchestra made me happy. Why is that not enough? Why does it have to be deeper or more cosmically significant than that?
Did you believe that doing those things were going to make you happy?
Yes, based on previous experience. That's
so you
evidence
had
in
a
and of
faith
itself.
commitment
No,
And
we
you
have
use
induction. We have
which your
uncertainty.
worldview does not lead to, because your worldview cannot explain
You
why
seem to be-
induction or the laws of logic exist. And therefore, when you used induction again, you presupposed that you were going to have happiness, therefore you used faith. And that's, again, where I believe the argument kind of falls down. I'm not saying, again, that you can't have some type of chemical reaction, but if that is what happiness is, I'm sorry, I want transcendent meaning. And I believe that happiness is more than just chemicals in my brain fizzing. And if chemicals in my brain fizz, and, oh, they fizz good when I do this, or fizz when I do that, well, gosh, we could all be opioids, and we'd feel really good, right?
Okay, so what he's trying to imply, I think, is that if you don't claim to know something with 100% certainty, which if you do, I would say you're either incredibly arrogant or wrong, and or both. We all have some uncertainty about our beliefs. Our beliefs are proportional based on the evidence we have. And I had evidence leading up to those moments that they would make me happy. That's why I asked my wife to marry me, right? And of course then, when it happened, I did feel the happiness, which gives me a more evidential base to jump off of in the future. It doesn't have to be certain for me to make an educated guess that something's going to make me happy in the end. And when he talks about, he wants to believe that happiness is something greater than a brain activity, that's all well and good. When I talked about happiness being a brain activity, you notice I gave evidence. I didn't just make an assertion or say, this is what I believe, and then leave it at that. I talked about brains being examined under a functional MRI and showed that happiness is tied to brain activity. Now, you may want to believe that meaning is more transcendent, or that happiness is something besides neurotransmitters in our brain. But if you want to argue that that's the case, you should be obliged to provide some evidence to that fact that overrides the entire mountain of what we know about neuroscience.
Okay, we have time for one more 2-minute argument for each side. Next up is the negative.
Okay. All right, so we're talking. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, I'm learning in college. I'm a sophomore, and I'm learning about cognitive dissonance and when you have different concepts in your mind and they don't mesh, they are logically inconsistent. You have cognitive dissonance, and one of them has to go. That makes me unhappy, and I would argue because there is that dissonance, that would make anyone unhappy to have beliefs that don't work. Sorry. All right, there we go. Is that
I can hear you well.
Sorry. So cognitive dissonance makes me unhappy. And forgive me if I forgot, but I don't remember your definition of faith. But if we define faith as belief without evidence, then necessarily faith has this cognitive dissonance of not having evidence for what I now stand and believing. So how would you define faith so that cognitive dissonance of this not having evidence for what we believe is not an issue for my happiness?
So Fessinger's cognitive dissonance theory, I believe 82. I could be wrong on that, Professor, but so I'm familiar with it. Yes, essentially the concept that you are saying is, hey, I don't really like cognitive dissonance, so when I take in information that I don't like, I have this desire to run from that information. We all are familiar with this idea, right? So one way that we deal with that is by selective exposure. The atheist does that by rejecting things like the proof of the resurrection, right? They reject those kind of things. You might say, hey, Christians do that by rejecting things like evolution, right? So we would say that there is some filter, and you don't like when there are ideas that run contrary to your beliefs. But cognitive dissonance proves good because it actually deals with our presuppositions, right? We all have presuppositions. That's why the naturalist denies things like miracles. That's why the naturalist says a man can't rise from the dead 3 days later. And that's why a naturalist says, hey, chemicals fizzing in my brain make me feel good. That is my ultimate purpose, to feel good, and I can't deny other people that idea. So that's where I believe that falls down. That's how I would use cognitive dissonance. I don't know if I completely answered a question there, but I kind of felt like that was a comment. Is that correct, sir?
That starts on the road. How would you define faith such that it is displaced by, such that it is not displaced by knowledge?
Well, again, I'm a Christian, so I'm going to define faith according to my worldview.
Okay.
which is the evidence of things hoped for and the hope for things unseen. Hebrews 11:1, right? So that's how I'm going to define faith. I don't know exactly how my colleagues define faith, but I see acts of faith in what they do over and over again. They presuppose human dignity. They presuppose that things they're going to do will bring them happiness, so they presuppose the laws of logic, but they cannot account for them. Again, that's been one of the major things that I've asked at some depth here, is can you provide a justification for the preconditions of intelligibility? The answer is no, and that has to make the atheist unhappy because they continue to use an inconsistent standard living in the Christian worldview.
Gotcha. One thing I would like to hear, however, is the atheist definition of faith. And then I'm done.
We might have two different definitions. You go first, I'm writing.
Well, Peter Boghossian has a really interesting definition of if you interchange faith with pretending to know things that you don't really know. And I think that's a really, because then whenever you start to interchange the word faith in sentences with that phrase, it puts a really interesting perspective on what faith seeks to define. Faith seeks to explain things. I mean, especially whenever you consider thousands and thousands of years ago, what faith sprung out of was the idea that humans didn't know things about the world. We didn't know where the sun went at night. And as we, began to develop, sciences and math and things like that explained these things, faith took on a different element. And so I would say that, faith is an amalgam of beliefs, superstitions, suspicions, traditions that seek to define the world around us.
Okay, so this might be a little long hike to get there, but I want to be very clear. Longer than 15 seconds. Faith obviously has a lot of definitions. One, like optimism for a brighter future. I have faith my beloved Arkansas Razorbacks are going to come back against Florida tonight. They're probably not.
But we'd be happy if they did.
We'd be very happy if they did. But that's obviously not what people mean when they claim religious faith, right? I would define religious faith as the suspension of inductive rules so you can believe pretty much anything. And in his opening, David talked about inductive rules and kind of trashed on them, and I wonder why. I even got that written to hit on in my clothes. Like, for those who don't know, inductive rules are like pattern recognition. If it happened before this way, it's probably going to happen this way in the future. And even religious people live this way. No matter how deeply believing a Christian, if they put their hand on a hot stove one week and just burn the crap out of it, they're not going to walk by the next week and put their hand on the stove and think, well, maybe it's not hot this time, right? We all live by inductive rules. They open the door to leave the house. They don't try to walk through it, right? They didn't read about this in the Bible. We all use inductive rules to figure things out. Sorry, this is what we have to work with. So he talks about all these presuppositions we make. We're just using inductive rules. This is what everyone does. It's how we figured out pretty much everything about the world, right? And so, using inductive rules, people don't rise from the dead, right? This just doesn't happen. And in order for Christianity to be true, you've got to find some way around the physical constraints, the way we know the universe to work. And that's where I think faith, in the religious sense, comes in, is looking past those to believe things that would otherwise be absurd.
Dr. Morris, in the interest of civility, may I request that this scholar go next, and then that these two be allowed to speak? They've been sitting here for over 20 minutes.
I didn't realize they were attempting to speak.
I don't mind taking
Okay, yeah.
We're not filling the time anyway, so knock yourselves out.
First of all, I'd like to say that, this whole subject matter, when I heard about it, wasn't that enticing to me, because I think you can be happy either way, but it makes me incredibly unhappy to hear your two stories that you used to be believers and aren't anymore. That makes me very sad. I think that happiness is more of a temperament, and in terms of how we approach our life, if it's based on emotions, it's a roller coaster ride. I'm a retired clinical social worker. I work with cognitive processing therapy, where it's about your thoughts affect how you feel, affects how you behave.
And so if you kind of base your life on how you feel, man, I feel sorry for you because it's going to be all over the place. So I think it's more about what we think, and what we think is based on our foundational propositions and our world beliefs and view of the world. And that affects the way we perceive and see things is going to affect everything else about our life. But the main thing that I wanted to come up here to the microphone for is this gentleman down here who's saying that it's our obligation as Christians to prove there is a God. Well, it's your obligation just as much to prove there isn't.
Okay, so there's a few things that got said there. First off, I'd like the audience to notice something. We report being happier later in life than we were at the beginning. And there's something going on in that man's head that caused him to lament our increased happiness. I don't want to walk, whatever is going on in your head that got you to that position, I don't want to be walking around in life cursing people for being happier. That's just, I don't know, God, I don't want to be uncivil, but I do expect better of myself than that. You also said that it's our job to prove God doesn't exist. Why is that? How would you prove something doesn't exist, other than the lack of any evidence that it exists? This is Russell's teapot. That's why the burden of proof is on whoever's making the claim. If I say to you, Smurfs don't exist, if you can't come up with an argument to the contrary, do you have to believe it? Well, no, obviously, I'm just making an assertion. What can be asserted without evidence can be rejected and should be rejected without evidence.
Okay. Argument for the lady?
Well, good.
Thank you for being so
hold that
patient.
mic right there. And I apologize, gosh, I'm so glad. Thank you, Dr. Judash-Busker, for making sure these folks get their words in.
It's my understanding that there's about 4,200 different religions in the world today. There has been far more.
Can I make a clarification? There's about 250,000, I believe, and 42,000 different sects of Christianity. I think that's the number you're trying to pull.
Well, and I probably agree with you on that. However, to keep the numbers within, so that there's no real argument, my brief search led me to 35 major Christian beliefs in the United States alone. There are far more, and that's just the major ones, not the minor sects like Moonies and stuff like that. If if the faith commitment is required for the pursuit of happiness is true, one of those religions has got to be true, and it would be the only religion that could possibly pursue happiness. All the rest of them contradict. Some of them are fighting wars against each other. Only one or none can be true. Can you tell me which one is true?
Yeah, I can tell you the one that is true. It is the triune God of Scripture who entered into creation to redeem creation unto himself. Have you ever written anything?
No.
Okay, you've never written anything like a letter to your significant other, you've never typed an email to anyone?
Yes.
Okay, so when you typed that email, I assume you had some degree of certainty it was going to communicate something to that individual, correct? So if I took that email and I read it into some way that you didn't intend, were you wrong or was I wrong? Excellent. So the Christian message is that actually all of us are wrong. The Christian message is that all of us are dead until Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit regenerates man and they call him unto him in repentance. We're all dead. Everyone's dead in sin. Everyone's rebellion. Everyone is born in rebellion, according to that Christian message.
That doesn't answer my question.
He's actually wrong. The one true religion is the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster.
I agree.
And in our faith, in our heaven, we have a stripper factory and a beer volcano.
I agree. No, you haven't answered my question.
Well, could you maybe clarify? I want to make sure. I thought that I did. I apologize. I wasn't trying to skirt it by any means.
I'll be glad to
Yeah.
explain it. With this, and I want to add to it the fact that prior to Christianity, which is the one that you profess is the one true religion, there were millions, if not billions, of people who probably thought, a lot of them thought they were pursuing happiness. But according to you, that is not the case. They were not pursuing happiness properly. They were not achieving happiness because Jesus hadn't even been born yet. But there are many contradictions among the religions that say, that would indicate that each one of them believes theirs is the true one, and only one can be true, and it's not just a big old Christian generality. There are many Christian sects that contradict each other to the point where they believe the others are not true. There can only be one true or none.
So we know through much evidence that there were individuals who called on a singular God, Yahweh. We know that Abraham had an experience with Yahweh. And we likewise know that Job, who is probably one of the first individuals that we would have in recorded or oral history, also called on Yahweh again. The Christian message is pretty simple. Everyone is dead in sin. And it isn't until God acts that they come into repentance. So to say that there's tons of people who have tons of beliefs, you bet there are. I would also say, though, that doesn't mean that the intent of the message was at all was wrong, right? And likewise, I would contend, just to continue on with that, there are multiple agreements within religious sects. All you have to do is look at the ideas of orthodoxy, and most Christians would agree to those things. Again, they would say that the Bible is the inspired word of God, Jesus Christ saves through grace alone. Those would be the major tenets of all evangelicals.
Well, let me interrupt you because we're getting off into preaching and not into debate. And you have done a lot of preaching and not debate.
Thank you. I'm glad to do that.
Well, we were here for a debate.
I think you got that.
So, the Muslims have a one deity religion.
Yes.
Are they able to pursue happiness in a meaningful way?
In a Christian worldview, the pursuit of happiness is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your strength, and all your soul.
Okay.
There is an ultimate transcendent.
It calls for a yes or no answer.
No.
I think he's saying no and justifying his answer.
No, they are wrong. In fact, they don't even. Again, there's an internal inconsistency within the Quran and their understanding of the Trinity. They multiple times within the Quran say that Mary is a part of the Trinity, which was obviously not true, and that was articulated very well by about 600 when it was written. So I'm sorry that I have somehow not offered clash tonight, but I have defined a very clear principle and asked for refutation, but I've also pushed a little bit farther, asking for justification for things like the laws of logic, the unity of nature, and induction, and I'm so far not hearing anything that can provide that. We know that time and chance acting on matter does not... Yeah, but before we even begin to talk about pursuing things, we have to understand that there are things and presuppositions we're taking for granted. Let's account for those presuppositions, and then we will move forward. That was my major charge. But it's connected very closely.
Okay. Hi guys.
Hey,
Can you all right?
Who is this? This is a friend of yours? Okay, good. Sorry. JT acted like he knew you, and I was like, oh, okay.
No, I'm just very cordial. I'm being civil, Dave.
Be nice, Dave.
Hi. You guys, the definition of faith is Hebrew something or other. What is it again?
Yeah, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen.
Okay, and to be easily persuaded to believe something The definition of gullibility is kind of very similar.
Could you say that again? I'm sorry. Sometimes I can't hear very well.
The definition of gullibility is exactly the same. So, in a sense, if we're pursuing happiness through gullibility, then ignorance would be bliss. Is that kind of where you're coming from? I mean, I don't see the difference between a faith and a gullibility proposition.
So again, I think, I do know that I would assume part of the framing of the definition does leave us some, we don't want to be ships passing in the night, but again, our view of happiness is rather clear. We believe that it is when one is in submission to God's purpose. But there are other definitions of happiness. Again, Cora offered that you believe things you don't know. Well,
I was talking about faith, not happiness.
Okay.
Yeah, the definition of faith you gave,
yes, sir,
is the same one for gullibility.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
And so you're saying
I don't believe that.
Okay. That's all I got.
Okay. Why even bother doing another debate in September? We're having like every debate we could possibly have right here.
It's good, and I always hope that I might look like I'm angry, but I'm trying to listen intently, and that's one thing that happens.
Be civil.
Okay, so we have closing statements, and the negative gets to go first, and you have 5 minutes. You can speak from wherever you wish to speak.
Okay, can I speak from here? I guess I can right?
We're going to switch.
Let's do it from here.
Okay, that's
All right. Let me just get my life together. So, going off of Sean's rebuttal, he talked about the definition of atheism. He said it's a system of belief. One, this is not at all relevant to whether or not we can pursue happiness, but for the sake of just responding, no, it's not. It's a conclusion. It's simply one conclusion about the world. It's not a system of belief. You can't draw any other conclusions. It doesn't tell you how to draw conclusions. It says nothing about logic. And believe me, lots of atheists don't believe in God for perfectly bad reasons. I've met them, right? Said the relationship between religion and morality is inherent. God is the basis for morality in Western philosophy. I mean, just look at the 10 Commandments. Only 2 of them are against our laws. Like, you literally, in the United States, it would be unconstitutional to make a law that says no graven images. It would be against the First Amendment. I'm not sure how you can say this is the basis for our laws in the West. Why do we like the civil clauses? We like them because we have shared desires and shared goals, and objectively, these help us to get there. He said, he's talking about an objective view of what atheism is, and he cited North Korea, as if one atheist jerk necessarily means that all atheists are jerks, or that the final endgame of atheism is necessarily becoming a nuclear power and outlawing negative press. As a counterpoint, from Heinrich Himmler was the lead of the SS in Nazi Germany. Hitler himself was a Catholic. They wore belt buckles that got moons. In his book, he talks about the oath the SS officers had to take. It was, what is your oath? I vow to you Adolf Hitler is Führer and Chancellor of Germany, Chancellor of the German Reich, loyalty and bravery. I vow to you and the leaders that you set for me, absolute allegiance until death, so help me God. So you believe in God? Yes, I believe in the Lord God. What do you think about a man who does not believe in God? I think he is overbearing, megalomaniac, and foolish. He is not one of us. Now, do Christians get the blame for Nazi Germany? No, that particular Christian does because he was a jerk, right? Likewise, you can't pretend that the endgame of atheism is North Korea. That's just absurd. One atheist jerk doesn't mean you need faith. I didn't use the word jerk. He said, being happy and pursuing happiness are not the same thing. Well, yes, but if we are happy, doesn't that imply that we pursued it? He literally said, Sean literally said, helping others brings happiness. Yes, it does, whether you believe in God or not. That's all you need in order to pursue happiness, to acknowledge, like, oh, when I help people, I feel good. I'll probably feel good if I help more people. Yay! And he kept talking about, within our framework, X, Y, and Z can't be true. I'm like, well, yes, but we reject your framework. I already talked about how you can build a moral framework with no appeal to God being necessary, just based on shared desires and a care for happiness, which we all pretty much inherently have. That's why we have jobs instead of being homeless. All right. In the rebuttal, he said, atheists reject all things immaterial. No, we don't. Concepts are immaterial. 2 plus 2 is a concept. It's immaterial, but we accept it, right? Concepts are how we get to other ideas, like how best to pursue happiness. He said, why does it matter if we pursue happiness? It feels good. We like feeling good. Societal happiness is part of that. He said, atheism is religion. I'm like, but he's defining pretty much, he's confusing uncertainty with faith. Like, by his definition, literally everything is a religion. And obviously everything is not a religion. Otherwise, science is a religion. Otherwise, my preference for pizza is a religion. Not everything is a religion just because we don't claim it with 100% certainty. Beliefs are proportional to the amount of evidence we have. He said we can't pursue happiness consistently after that gentleman's question. And he keeps saying, like, and in his response, he keeps saying, our worldview says X, Y, and Z. Well, that's fine and all, but if you're going to base your response off your worldview, you should be obliged to give some evidence that your worldview is true, and that hasn't happened. In that he said there's no objective basis for what makes us happy, and obviously there are objectively certain things that make us happy. Locking away murderers, his own partner said helping other people brings happiness. Yes, it does, objectively so. We can experience it. We can see other people being happy when they do it. This is not something we're just pulling out of our word I'm not allowed to use. He said naturalists deny miracles. Well, yes, we do, for a number of reasons. Inductive reasoning is awesome. I literally have here, he ripped on inductive reasoning, and I wrote induction rules, exclamation, exclamation, underline, underline. We all use inductive reasoning. It's why we drove here instead of trying to fly. And think about it. Literally everything we've ever explained about the world has been found to be natural forces acting on inanimate objects, like literally all of it, right? We're just making an informed guess about how the rest are going to go. I thought I heard God whispering to me. He keeps saying, you presuppose this, you presuppose that. I'm like, no, we're making educated guesses based on the body of evidence we have. Singing in the past has made me happy, so it makes sense to assume that singing in the future will make me happy until I meet some contradictory evidence, and then I'll integrate that and change my position further. We make decisions based on knowledge, and this is how knowledge is acquired. It's how all of us, Christians or atheists, do things. He keeps talking about the knowledge beyond empirical senses. Okay, so like not all beliefs are knowledge. Muslims will claim to know that their religion is true. Obviously, you classify that as a belief rather than something they can rightly claim to know, right? So some claims to knowledge should not be classified there. They're beliefs. That's right. There are certain things we can claim to know. Locking away murderers leads to a healthier society. Obviously, objectively, anybody who's taken an intro sociology class knows this. It's also why science is rightly claimed to be knowledge, and things like Mexicans coming here to overthrow the government isn't. And asserting, obviously, based on the Muslim thing, asserting you know something, or asserting that something is knowledge doesn't make it so. You have to provide evidence. So when he talks about knowledge acquired without empirical reasoning or beyond your empirical senses, which frankly is all we have to work with, he should be obliged to explain how he got that knowledge. Okay, so two major things to close. So let's talk about what it means to make a choice. Every time you make a choice, you're choosing what you think will get you what you want the most, which is tied to your pursuit of happiness, right? If it did make you feel better, why would you make that choice? Everyone can make choices, atheists, Christians, we all make choices based on what we think will make us happy. It doesn't have to do anything with God. Should I come down here to do a debate, or should I spend another night up in Kansas City with my wife? Well, I'm not going to give you guys every night because I love my wife, but one night, sure, I made the choice to come down here because I think it would make me happy. And with regards to certainty of beliefs, no belief can be 100% certain. This is even true for God. Think about it. There could be some demon feeding God every thought he has, including his belief that he's all-knowing. This is assuming God exists, right? This is the hypothesis of the Cartesian demon. God would be none the wiser. And he wouldn't know it if it were actually happening. So he has to allow some uncertainty for that. No belief can be certain. You always have to be open to new evidence as it comes in. And so, like, that's how he gets to saying that every belief is a matter of faith, when it's obviously not. Certain beliefs are more credible than others based on the evidence we have. And lastly, he keeps talking about, in our worldview, X, Y, and Z. But he's given no evidence that his worldview is true. Anything, like I said to the gentleman there, can be asserted without evidence. But that's all it is, it's an assertion. And I hope you acknowledge that when I've made a claim in the course of this debate, I haven't just made an assertion, whether it's with unthinking particles being able to perform logic, like with computer parts. And now he might say that, oh, well, computers don't assemble. Oh, wait, we're done? Okay, done. Thank you. Okay, so his close is going to be 35 minutes. No, you take all the time you need.
All right, well, we'll be good with time and with your final piece.
Thank you for acknowledging that depth and integrity of the discussion is more than the time frame. So you guys take whatever time you need, and thank you guys for listening to me drone. 10 points from Slytherin.
Yeah, I think that last bit that JT said there, thank you to everyone for taking time out of their Wednesday evening to come here.
This is for you guys.
We've already, I think at least, and I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've already gone well over the time.
We have about your closing time left, 13 minutes.
So, but anyway, we're just going to start, kind of work through a few things, or at least that's what I'm going to start, work through a few things here. First, going back to the criterion that was initially laid out in Dave's opening speech, a criterion of logical consistency. Within the framework of argumentation, morality requires faith. That linkage there is central within Western philosophical thought. That's not me pulling something magical out of thin air. That is philosophers that are frankly considerably more learned on the subject than I say that those two things are linked. And therefore, to deny God is to deny the first cause of the moral order and the obligation, therefore, to conform to that order. And that's where I think we need to hinge on some of this discussion tonight. We've heard a great deal from our wonderful opponents about the concept of self-constructed or societally constructed morality, but this is in and of itself a floating morality. The example that JT has cited throughout the evening is an example of, well, we lock up the mass murderers, and he is absolutely right. We should lock up individuals like Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, or more recently, the Washington, D.C. Beltway sniper, John Lee Malvo, I think was his name. Not that his name is particularly relevant, but when we look at the very definition of a serial killer or a mass murderer, drawing on that same imagery, those individuals repeat their actions of mayhem because they find happiness within those actions. They have self-constructed a framework of happiness for themselves outside of the moral order. Therefore, outside of morality, which requires, according to Western philosophical thought, a belief in the divine, morality and therefore happiness become floating targets. Who is to say that one person's pursuit is any more or any less important or any more or any less valid than any other without that concrete framework? Atheistic happiness, indeed, at least within the framework of our opponents here, I'm certainly not wanting to draw any parallels to refer to JT or Cora as anything in terms of anything other than cordial, but they're still predicated on morality. Again, look at the social activism causes that they are each active in. They find happiness within those causes because those causes are predicated on what they believe or what they feel or what they view as being a moral choice. Again, drawing us back to the fact that Dave and I brought up repeatedly, that atheism is itself a form of faith. And because atheism must be a form of faith in order to borrow from the moral framework of Western philosophical thought, therefore they must concede on a logical level that faith is required for the pursuit of happiness. Otherwise, there is an internal logical inconsistency within their argumentation, because science cannot qualitatively explain morality, and morality is needed for happiness. Within this framework of self-constructed morality, if we are to each construct our own morals and our own morality to say what is right and what is wrong, then we have individuals like Kim Jong-un, Joseph Stalin, Chairman Mao, Idi Amin,
General Noriega, take your pick. There are many to choose from who have self-constructed for themselves their own moral frameworks outside of the divine, at least certainly within the cases of the North Korean and Soviet and Chinese examples. Because they self-constructed those frameworks. Those leaders, at least, and the ruling elite in those nations, one should certainly argue and certainly view that they found happiness within those frameworks. And yet, we as a society, with a greater weight of numbers, understanding that those moral choices are wrong, draws us back to the fact that there is a logical inconsistency if the atheists are unwilling to admit that they have a faith system. They talk, Dave and I also talk at some length about the rejection of the immaterial as something that is required, again, within the framework of atheism. You have to have qualitative data. You have to conclusively prove or disprove your point. We've talked a great deal, and JT has brought up most excellently, I might add, that it is incumbent upon us as Christians to defend the existence of God, that we must conclusively prove the existence of God. But if that is true, that is indeed a sword, JT, that cuts both ways. Because science must therefore, atheism must therefore conclusively disprove the existence of God with empirical data. Because if you cannot demand that we provide empirical data while being unwilling to provide empirical data yourself. And while certainly, yes, our understanding of the natural world has greatly increased from what it was in the times of ancient man, I'm certainly not going to argue that point either. Science has yet to conclusively disprove the existence of God. The Christian pursuit of happiness is bound by this fact. Happiness is not immaterial. Happiness is immaterial, and unhappiness is equally immaterial. Again, those noted serial killers that I mentioned, thanks to my serial killers class at Southwest Baptist, they found happiness within the pursuit of their actions that went against and cut against the societal grain. But without an objective moral framework, which must come from a faith mechanism, who's to say, other than society, with its floating target of morality, that those individuals were wrong?
All right, I have about 3 more minutes to wrap things up. I just want to, well, thank you. I want to just thank both of you, just such kind people, and I mean that sincerely. It's been a pleasure to work with them. We had an interesting resolution. You've debated a lot of debates. Have you had a resolution like this?
I think this is the first time I've ever done faith as a requirement for happiness.
Yeah, an interesting resolution. So I thank you guys so much. I know you've put great effort. Thank you again for allowing me to be here. Allow me to just kind of crystallize what I think are the main components of this debate. As Christians, we have a real solid belief that happiness is achieved when one submits to God. Yes, in the atheist worldview, you can achieve some level of chemicals fizzing in your brain, and you can decide whether that is happiness, or you can achieve something that has transcendent meaning and allowing yourself to submit to the Creator God. I will show you something once again. In the beginning of my case, my first argument was laid out. Can the atheist worldview provide justifications for the preconditions of intelligibility? In other words, we have things like the laws of logic, the law of non-contradiction, the law of the excluded middle, the law of induction, the law of identity. In the atheist worldview, you reject transcendent, universal, timeless truths. We cannot dig up the laws of logic. But the atheists use them to make their arguments. When Cora presents evidence, what does she assume? That you will have a connection in your head, but it's an immaterial reality that she appeals to. So I ask you, based upon the criterion of the round, can the atheists be consistent? When they choose to make a faith commitment that something will make them happy, they use the law of induction, and I'm a big fan of the law of induction as well. And likewise, they cannot account for that. You see, matter in motion and time and chance acting on matter can never produce truths. As Christians, we have an objective standard of truth. And that's what we pursue for happiness. Now, we can argue all day, but there are multiple standards or multiple definitions of happiness. And so you have to choose tonight. Am I going to define what I think is happy? Because we've seen the mess that societies get into when they make such a decision. We've seen what happened in China when they suppressed in Tiananmen Square the people's demonstration for basic human rights. But all night tonight, my colleagues will contend that humanity has value. They'll say it's important for people to seek out happiness. Oh, that's good. And I seek out happiness this way. But every time you use the laws of logic, you appeal to a worldview that you cannot justify. And every time you presume and presuppose human dignity and value, you appeal to a worldview that is without and outside of the realm of your accepted knowledge. When you say, I don't accept the resurrection, what you're saying is, my presupposed naturalistic worldview will not accept facts. I cannot deal, as my colleague, or as one individual said, with things like cognitive dissonance, and I'll reject and run. And Scripture says, all humanity runs. All humanity suppresses the truth, Romans chapter 1:18. Why do I know God exists? Because the impossibility of the contrary. Without God, you cannot have the laws of logic, human dignity, or morality. And without an objective standard for happiness, one is left trying to define it and trying to suppress those views of happiness that run contrary to it. Thank you again for being here tonight. Thank you for listening. And thank you for thinking.
I want to thank you all for coming this evening. We do need to clear the theater because there's another event scheduled in the theater. If anyone is wanting to continue the discussion with any of them, there'll probably be a gathering on the first floor outside the Center for Community Engagement, and you should feel free to stick around and talk out there. Thank you all very much. Have a good evening.